Well, we are inching closer and closer to that November election, so we continue our quest to find every name on our local ballot. And here's one right here, Morgan Kirkpatrick. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Talk with me a little bit about why you are running for the State Board of Education.
Well, I taught middle school for 14 years here in Lubbock ISD, and I thought that was going to be my forever career.
Yeah.
I never pictured myself doing anything else. And then when COVID hit, teaching took on a whole new meaning, and the changes that came with COVID were extremely frustrating, and especially given the fact that we had the opportunity to reimagine education as we know it.
Yeah.
And instead, leaders and legislators at every level doubled down on the things that we know don't work for our students. And so when I saw that my opponent would be running unopposed, I decided that week before the filing deadline that I wanted to challenge him. And so I've learned a lot in the 2 years since I've left teaching.
Yeah.
And I want to be a voice for students and teachers in Texas.
And what do you think is missing there? In full disclosure, my dad is a college professor, my mom is a teacher.
Oh, man.
I've seen it firsthand that there are mounting challenges in the teaching world, but what voice do you think is missing there?
I feel like the teacher's voice, and to an extent the students, and therefore their families. But mainly with the teachers, it seems like legislators or people making the decisions don't have conversations with the people in the classroom doing the work.
Yeah.
And so even though I'm not in the classroom now, I've been there, I've done that, I have that experience. And so I feel like that will make a huge difference in the decisions that are made and how they're made.
It certainly helps to have that experience because it is unmatched. There's nothing like it. Is there maybe something that you would immediately change when you get there? I mean, what are the things that make you want to be in this position now?
Well, two of the most important responsibilities of the State Board of Education include setting the curriculum standards, reviewing those, and also approving instructional materials.
Okay.
And so that impacts teachers and students on a day-to-day level.
Sure.
Because those are the standards are things that the teachers have to teach and the students are required to know before they graduate. And so having watched the last few SBOE meetings on their live stream, I have heard multiple conversations where several of the members are out of touch with what goes on in the classroom and
Interesting.
Why we need certain standards and instructional materials and how those break down. You know, it's not just especially I was a reading and English teacher, and
Okay.
so those skills spiral. You start learning sentence structure in second or third grade,
Yeah.
and you build on that throughout your education. And so it's just things like that you don't really know until you're in the classroom doing it.
Yeah.
I feel like it could make a huge difference.
Yeah. And do you feel like the direction of the State Board of Education right now is going in a positive direction? Would that be something that you try to amend or change in some way?
I would definitely work to adjust course. And one of the ways I learned a lot about what the State Board of Education does was through a podcast called Teaching Texas.
Okay.
And the history of it is fascinating. And so the pendulum has shifted multiple times in the last few decades. And so we're in that swing to the hard right conservative side. And so in 2022, there were several extremely conservative members, including my opponent, who were elected. And I don't think that education should be a partisan issue. Local school boards aren't partisan races,
Yeah.
but this one is. And so that's where I feel like it's time to make sure that we're doing things with students' best interests at heart.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know that education in the state of Texas has become a partisan conversation. We're moving into this legislative session in January where school choice and so many other components, school safety, school funding, are going to be on the table. They're going to be priorities. Where does the State Board of Education fit in that? How do you help?
It's a very intricate puzzle, and so while we don't have authority over the basic school finance system, so to speak, we do have. So one of the biggest things that I don't think a lot of people understand about the voucher scam is that private schools are not held to the same standards as public schools.
Like testing and that sort of thing?
And the standards, the TEKS that students are required to learn and teachers are required to teach.
Yeah.
And which leads to the standardized testing. And so they're not required to be beholden to those things. And so that's where I feel like the SBOE fits in, because we set the graduation requirements and with those standards. And so I think a piece of the puzzle is to make sure that, like I know Abbott and our local Senator Charles Perry have acted like vouchers are a done deal in the next session. Seems like they're discounting the November election, because there is a possibility that we can, change that dynamic. But making sure that private schools, anybody getting public funding, is held to those standards.
The same standards.
The same standards as far as what kids are taught, what they're required to learn, and standardized tests, which. That's a whole other conversation.
Sure. Yeah.
But
I haven't ever met a teacher who just wanted to give the STAR test a hug, for sure. But I do understand there is a certain level of accountability attached to that. And I know that a lot of school funding comes from that. It gets a little complicated when we get into the voucher conversation, and I'm sure it will get more complicated come January. But I think a lot of people don't quite understand the role there of the State Board of Education, how that all fits in. Is there anything else that's really surprised you about learning about this job that you're going for here?
Well, I do think, because a lot of people have asked about the vouchers and teacher pay, and so much of that is under the state legislature.
Yeah.
And learning all of those ins and outs, it's like, I feel like this is where I could best serve teachers and students, but there is also a need for people in the legislature to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And so I hope everybody will go to the ballot this November with public education in mind, because until we start voting for our students and with our students' best interests at heart, nothing's going to change.
Yeah. Well, interested to see how this goes, excited to see how this goes, and anything that is student-minded, I think it can't go wrong, right? So, yeah, well, appreciate you being here, and we look forward to watching you.